Jordan Akira Meadows stood in the shadow of Bryant-Denny Stadium, feeling both the weight and the opportunity of following in his father's footsteps. Transferring to Alabama for his senior year wasn't just about football, it was about honoring the family legacy while forging his own path. This was the final stop on a journey that had taken him from California to South Carolina and now to the heart of college football's fiercest football program, the SEC powerhouse his father once called home. Alabama's prestige had faded somewhat since Nick Saban's departure. To begin the year, Austin Mack quarterbacked an unranked Alabama team against the underdog West Virginia Mountaineers, who had a preseason top 10 ranked defense. Aside from the family legacy and rich football tradition, Jordan was set to be the starting back from the get-go in week 1. Even then, Jordan was not given many opportunities in his first game with Bama and was missed in the end zone before the half to make the deficit a one-score game. In the second half, it got even uglier as Austin Mack threw a pick down the middle on a post route. The offenses for both teams were struggling as Bama just had 44 rushing yards and averaged just under 3 yards per play overall. To begin the fourth quarter, there was a glimmer of hope as Austin Mack found his receiver, who took it all the way from the 30-yard line after the catch for the touchdown. But West Virginia played really outstanding defense throughout the game and held Alabama to just 17 points, with 14 coming in the fourth quarter. With Jordan transferring twice over the past 2 years, it felt like a repeat of last season, where South Carolina played their first game with minimal involvement from Jordan while he waited to really have his debut in the second game of the season against a Division II school. The South Carolina game versus FCS East was troubling as the Gamecocks only scored 1 touchdown last year, and Jordan hoped and expected a better performance from his new team. If you're looking for drama, this game in the schedule is not where you're going to find it, as Jordan and Bama did roll through this game behind one of Jordan's best games ever. Not only did he make plays catching the ball out of the backfield, but he really showcased some shiftiness this season that was non-existent in his first 2 years at Stanford. One of the best things about following these young college players throughout their careers is seeing that they generally do not stay stagnant, meaning that they develop their skills and they do get better each year. In Jordan's case, starting as a top-tier recruit, he had generally underwhelmed compared to expectations so far. Some of you may be thinking, didn't he just win all SEC second-team honors at South Carolina last year? And he obviously did, but that doesn't quite cut it as one of the best recruits in the country. The expectation is championships, bowl games, and big awards, not just all SEC mentions. We tell unique stories here, and not every 5-star wins the Heisman and goes on to win 10 Super Bowls. Sometimes prospects are disappointments. Jordan hadn't been that so far, but he certainly wasn't must-watch TV either for most college football fans. Jordan and the Tide would play their next game against number 18 Ohio State. In week 3, Jordan had missed the game due to a minor calf injury against UAB, and Alabama was able to take care of business. Jordan had his workload cut down in this game a bit while still nursing the calf injury, and Alabama found themselves down 21-3 at half against Ohio State behind a sputtering passing game performance from Austin Mack. It seemed like the game was over midway through the third as Mack threw another pick down the middle, but somehow Bama ended up clawing their way back to being down by just a score. Jordan caught a ball out of the backfield and got the first in the Ohio State red zone, but the hit that he ended up taking knocked him out for the rest of the game. He watched from the sidelines as Alabama scored the touchdown, but got locked up on the 2-point conversion that would have tied the game. Being at Alabama brought Jordan closer to his family's legacy in a way that he hadn't anticipated. Everywhere he went, reminders of his father, Zach Meadows, loomed large. Former players, coaches, and even fans who had been around long enough would mention Zach's name whenever they saw Jordan. They'd recount stories of his dad's dominant runs, the way he carried the team on his back during big moments, and how he'd gone on to a successful NFL career. It was flattering, sure, but also suffocating at times. Jordan knew that no matter what he did, people would always compare him to Zach. Jordan had a vintage Herculean comeback against A&M in a game that seemed like it was over before half. Jordan was once again sidelined with an injury while Bama and A&M went to OT, where A&M eventually failed a 2-point conversion, leaving Bama with an upset win at home. Austin Mack finished the game with 5 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. Jordan's relationship with his father had always been one of mutual respect, but being at his dad's alma mater added a new layer of complexity. Zach had never pressured him to follow in his footsteps, which Jordan appreciated, but now that he was here, he couldn't help but feel like his father watched him more closely. Their conversations took on a different tone, less about advice and more about shared experiences. Zach would tell him stories about his time at Alabama, about the coaches who had shaped him, the games that defined his career, and the lessons that went beyond football. But there were also moments of tension, moments where Jordan felt like he was living in the shadow of his father's legacy rather than standing in his own spotlight. One of the unexpected perks of being in Alabama was reconnecting with his uncle Marcus. Marcus had played linebacker at Alabama back in the day, and while he didn't have the same NFL career as Zach, he was a beloved figure in the Tuscaloosa community. Marcus had stayed close to the program, mentoring young players and offering advice to those struggling with the pressures of SEC football. Jordan started spending time at Marcus's house on the weekends, soaking in his uncle's stories and advice. Marcus' house was a modest brick home not far from campus, and sitting on the porch with his uncle as the sun set became one of Jordan's favorite routines. Marcus didn't sugarcoat things. He talked about the toll football took on his body, about the transition to life after the game, and how important it was to stay grounded. "Football doesn't last forever, Jordan," Marcus told him one evening, handing him a cold drink as they sat on the porch. "You're lucky you're good at it, but don't forget that there's a lot more to life than this game." That kind of talk was something that Jordan didn't hear often, especially not in the high-stakes world of Alabama football, but it stuck with him. Marcus had lived the life, seen the ups and downs, and managed to find peace on the other side of not playing the sport professionally. Jordan wasn't sure what the pro football world held for him. He had considered himself a first-round pick since his first game at Stanford, but scouts were not seeing it that way. Scouts saw an average athlete who couldn't cut it as a pure receiver due to the lack of separation against anyone besides linebackers. Jordan thought of himself as a Swiss Army knife like his dad, but he was more like a Swiss Army potato. One thing that Jordan did take pride in, though, throughout his entire college career was mentoring younger players, a trait that he inherited from his father. As a senior at Alabama, the role became even more significant. Freshmen looked up to him, not just because of his last name, but because of his journey. He had been through it all, changing schools, battling injuries, and balancing the pressures of expectations. And that experience made him someone his teammates could trust. Jordan made it a point to be available to anyone who needed advice, whether it was about football or life. He remembered how hard it had been to adjust as a freshman, so he'd often find himself in late-night conversations with younger players, offering guidance on everything from handling academics to dealing with the pressure of performing in front of thousands of fans. In particular, Jordan took one of the younger running backs under his wing, a freshman named Tyree. Tyree had all the talent in the world, but struggled with the mental side of the game. He'd get frustrated after mistakes, let missed assignments snowball into bad practices, and sometimes questioned if he even belonged at a place like Alabama. Jordan saw a lot of his younger self in Tyree, the doubt, the uncertainty, and made it his mission to help push him through it. "Man, this place can feel like a pressure cooker sometimes," Jordan said one evening after practice as they sat on the bleachers, "but you gotta find a way to stay calm, to tune that all out. You're here for a reason. You were one of the best backs in college football. Don't let one bad rep mess with your head." Jordan felt it was important to leave a lasting impact on the people who would carry the torch after him. Jordan realized that part of his legacy wouldn't just be what he did on the field, but how he helped others navigate their own challenges. This step up in leadership came at the perfect time for a struggling football program at Alabama that had lost its way. The team had fallen to 4-5 after getting ran out of the building in Kentucky, and their next game was against Florida, and Jordan could feel the impending end of his college career getting closer and closer. As the season progressed, Jordan found himself thinking a lot about the concept of legacy. Alabama was built on them, and everywhere he went, he was reminded of the greats who had come before him, including his father. But Jordan realized that the legacy he was building wasn't about championships or records, though that would be nice. It was about resilience, about the journey that had taken him from Stanford to South Carolina and now to Bama. Jordan thought about how his own decision to transfer had shaped him. It hadn't been easy to leave Stanford or South Carolina for that matter. Each move had been met with uncertainty, and at each time he'd questioned whether he was doing the right thing. But looking back, Jordan could see how each step led him to this moment, to Alabama, to a place where he could take everything he learned and leave it all on the field. As the season neared its end, Jordan started to reflect on what came next. The NFL was the obvious goal, but he wasn't thinking about just football. Whether it was business, coaching, or something entirely different, Jordan felt ready to take on whatever challenges awaited him after graduation. His economics professors had inspired him in ways that he hadn't expected, and he developed a genuine interest in the intersections between sports and business. He realized that just like with football, his career after Alabama would require hard work, dedication, and the same grit that had gotten him through the ups and downs in college. But no matter what path he chose, Jordan knew one thing for sure. He was more than his father's legacy. He was Jordan Akira Meadows, not Zacchaeus Randall or Zach Meadows. Alabama had already been eliminated from making a bowl, something that everyone who's followed Jordan's career is too familiar with. The lack of team success throughout Jordan's career was actually mind-boggling. No matter what program Jordan went to, the quarterback struggled and the defense gave up big points. Now, Jordan didn't win the Heisman, he didn't win the Best Running Back Award, but he did make All-SEC second team once again with 865 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, some of you might be asking the question, what's going to be next for Jordan Akira Meadows? Is he going to be heading to the NFL? Is he going to pursue coaching? Wait for the first episode of the Zacchaeus Randall series to come out, which will explain more about Jordan's future.